Hello everyone, and welcome to this, I guess, a roundtable or just a chat with James Jefferies. Hi James, good to see you this morning. Yeah, it's morning. I know my times and dates. As we talk about both our experiences researching bomber commands and how emotive the topic can be, how difficult it can be for us as historians to address. Now, this is coming off the back of my talk on my personal history and how research is personal, and my grandfather's story of bomber commands. If you haven't watched that talk yet, please do go give it a watch, because it is interesting. It certainly is a personal reflection on my own research as a BA student all those many years ago, back when I was at Winchester. Do give it a watch, and then come back, because this is kind of building on that and developing that talk in a different way in your language as well. So, that being said, hi James, it's good to see you this morning.
Yeah, good to see you. It's the way of research life, isn't it? You don't really know what day it is or time it is. You're just engrossed in the madness of research.
Just another day. I mean, you're completely right. I mean, you sit there and you wait for, I don't know, for me this week was waiting for feedback from my supervisor, and I got it back on Thursday, and it's like, well, all guns blazing, and then today's Saturday, and I feel like it's a Monday because I've been working. So, the fun lives of doing PhDs,
Yes,
wouldn't
definitely.
change it for the world. So, I guess the question I'll ask you, James, and you can ask it back to me as well, but I'll ask you, is what drove you to be interested in the history of bomber command? Because it is a very niche topic in that regard. So what drew you in that direction as an historian?
Well, I mean, I'd always had the interest in the RAF from the Battle of Britain Fighter Command perspective. And I mean, you can look at Bomber Command being part two of that, what happened next. And so I grew up really with the familiar stories. I mean, watched the Dam Busters film and, the usual things you're brought up with. Watched a few documentaries, and I mean, it's incredibly nuanced. And then the biggest thing is it's incredibly emotional. There's still protests. You still get memorials being defaced. You still get veterans being ignored, etc. You're now seeing, I think, a change in that, and you're seeing this working together, this reconciliation. So you get, I mean, the fact that Coventry and Dresden are twinned, for example, I think is incredible. But it's a subject that you just end up finding more and more fascinating, from all perspectives, and also that how do you deal with this? How do you come to terms with this? And in the middle of the biggest war in modern times, it's just, I mean, I imagine that's a similar thing for you. I mean, I don't really have a personal perspective. I mean, my great granddad was in the RAF during the war as a aircraftsman. So if he was on the ground, at air bases and such like, didn't get into an aircraft at all. But with you, having that, and also I didn't know him, I didn't grow up with him at all. So it's just stories handed down to me. So it feels detached, which I think is incredible with the talk you gave, which I actually think is a very courageous talk to give, to approach not only the subject of bomber command, but also a direct relationship with. And I guess what question, I'm just flipping the question on you now, is, I mean, how did you approach that?
Oh, how to
If,
approach
like,
that?
from the
Yeah.
off, the first thing you thought, right, I want to know, obviously you want to know more from a personal perspective, but then when you're fitting it in with obviously the dissertation and you're speaking about how it did, that you're talking about specific use of language and such like that you used. I mean, how did you approach that initially? That's yeah.
Well, it certainly is interesting. How do I approach it? I mean, the first thing that always stood out to me was the stories that I had from my grandfather always stood out to me as kind of a starting point. Okay, this is bomber command. I'm really interested in this, and going to museums was a great way of building that knowledge and building that kind of understanding of what's going on with the air crews. But when I came to be an academic historian, obviously you know, I had to do a lot of background reading. I had to kind of figure out what is going on in all this. So why was there this change in 45? Why did my grandfather feel this such emotion and anger and whatnot? I had to figure out what happened. So my first thing I had to do was understand that change in 45 to 46, 47, 48. I had to understand that. And I spent a lot of time reading that. I went across the country. I visited as many places as possible. Chichester being one of them, Lincolnshire being another one, Ely, Bombercar Memorial. I had to figure out, why was there this change? Why was there a lack of change, or why was there a lack of memorization? I had to figure this out, and that was the kind of the key thing I had to get in my head, because I had this story from my grandfather, that after the Second World War, very changed, and he never talked about this kind of thing and his anger. So I knew there was a change. I knew that there was a change. I knew about the raids of Bomber Command. I grew up with understanding the raids, but I didn't understand why. And that was the kind of the key question I had to seek out and find out. And so focusing my research originally on that question was how I had to approach it, because otherwise it would have just been a mess. I think otherwise I charted the 80s and 90s, but without understanding the big question of why there was a change, it would have all been a complete mess. And thankful for historians like Mark Connolly and the like for pointing me in that direction in the first place, because their books were really helpful in that regard.
Yeah.
Really helpful. So I guess that's kind of. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's obviously very detached from what you normally research, and sort of Civil War, Anglo-Dutch Wars, that sort of, which I suppose the other element as well is it's still in living memory, which adds to the emotive element, doesn't it? You still got veterans, you still got survivors that were bombed, etc., on both sides. You probably still got a lot of coming to terms on their part, as well as nationally and emotionally and on a human level, for us.
I had decision to make. Do I interview veterans?
Yeah.
That's a huge decision I had to make. Do I do that? And the decision was done by myself and my supervisor was not to.
Yeah.
I think if I had done, I mean, a lot of good work is done with oral history, and a lot of good work is done with veterans and getting their stories down. But I don't think it would have been good for my dissertation. I don't think it would have worked. And I think, especially with my own personal attachment to it, I think it would have been it would have been so hard. I think that kind of thing, you need that detachment from, so you can ask questions. You can take a step back easier. I think for me, I'd have gone in there, whatever oral testimony setting, and it would have been very tough to separate these things, and so I made a decision. I did make the decision not to do that, and that was a wise decision. And I'm grateful for those historians who do the oral testimonies and who do get their stories and who do ask those good questions. But for me, I think it would have been, the questions would have probably been loaded, and they certainly would have had a lot of passion, because again, a lot of would have been my grandfather, almost my grandfather speaking through me to the other veterans and asking how they felt, and it wouldn't have helped my already emotive piece of work any more. But saying that, just students who do get those oral histories they're absolutely they're gold mines. They're absolutely fantastic.
Oh, yeah. There's so much. It's interesting that the word you use there, felt rather than thought, which is, again, it is that connection. I mean, the other thing is, like, if you start interviewing veterans, I had this in my dissertation. So I was looking at people who don't know. I did Bomber Command in the Battle of Britain. There's a talk as well online. I do watch it. Shameless plug.
I was talking about Dutch War, which James mentioned at some point.
Get that in there. But yeah, I mean, I thought about it. I thought about interviewing, but at the time, very few who actually survived the Battle of Britain, because you've got 5 years of war to go through, actually made it through. And the casualty rates during the Battle of Britain, especially the 2 group, which I was desperate to learn more about, didn't survive. And then you've got, almost 70 years worth of time passed. There weren't many around, less than, say, people who were on later raids, 44, 45. So that kind of settled that for me, not in a nice way, but that was settled. But then, when you think about that, you've then got to interview, people on the ground. You've got to look at mass observation, what was happening, what were people thinking. And then this is the rabbit holes that I constantly end up going down. You got to think about, what did the bomber mean before the war and what did it mean after? Because, before the war, you had that mass fear, you had that panic, um, you had very similar to the 50s, actually, this sense of, mutually assured destruction. That was the idea, that these bombers would just come over, destroy infrastructure, and wars would be very quick, and that's it. And it
Yeah.
might actually act as a deterrent. So that was prevalent. And then when it was coming to the fore, you've got the bombing of Abyssinia, you've got the bombing of China by Imperial Japan. So it's happening in the world. You've infamously got Guernica. Then you've got Warsaw once the war starts in Northern Europe. So there is this build up and change of perception of just each of these events as they happen. And gas was a huge fear as well. Gas was used by the Italians in Abyssinia, and it wasn't used in the end, in Northern Europe. It was used by Imperial Japan, but that was a major fear. So there's all of these elements coming in, as the war progresses, and then the war itself creates these new memories, these new perspectives. So this is what I mean. You could just go down rabbit holes trying to piece it together.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you said something as well about, people surviving the war and whatnot, and trying to, you got to ask that question. If I'll do all histories and interview, who are you going to pick? Because
Yeah.
there aren't many survivors. I mean, I did dissertation 2014, 2015. But you've got to think, well, do I go for those who lived the whole war? Do I go for the ones who at the end? Do I go for those after the war, and who served across the world in Bomber Command or in Coastal Command or whatever it could be?
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of questions, and it's been a huge project to do as well. I mean, not only the emotional aspect that I'd have had, also the resource aspect of it. How do you fit it in? And I think I look back, I did my dissertation at the worst time possible, because the Bomber Command Memorial was built just beforehand.
Yeah.
And the International Bomber Command Centre was being planned. So I was stuck in the middle of these two kind of really important things. It'd been really good to do it after the construction of the International Bomber Command Centre.
Yeah.
Which also be fantastic to kind of also get more sources and more kind of.
But the digital archive is absolutely incredible. I've used it numerous times.
I was so annoyed that it opened then, not earlier. I was like, come on. But I was stuck in this kind of moment because I was stuck in this process of reconciliation that was going on. And it's still going on now, but like it was kind of the high point of it. The new memorial bill and the wording on the new memorial, which I think is very important and helpful. But I kind of wish I wrote this maybe a year too later, because it would have really helped put everything in perspective as well. I was kind of stuck in this kind of a high point of emotion of Bomber Command, a really high point, and that didn't help the argument, because I was caught up with this. It was in news quite a lot of times as well, so I was stuck in this kind of this environment. I think that's important to note, that I didn't mention this in the talk, that yes, the personal story, my grandad's life, his death, but also post his death as well, and seeing the things of reconciliation that he didn't see, and being stuck in the environment I was stuck in as well, with all these things going on about Bomber Commands as well, also influenced me as well. I think it's very important to.
I do think at that time there is, I won't say a panic, but a little bit of there's not many veterans left. We need to do something, and it is privately funded. The National Bomber Command Memorial, I think it was Robin Gibb, who had an uncle in Bomber Command, was leading a lot of this, but so were families. It wasn't a government thing by any means. And same goes with, International Bomber Command Centre, the years to get a campaign medal, which in the end was a clasp to the 3945 star. but it's been a battle. It's got its own story. And I mean, the interesting thing is, I think in my research, there are two types of veterans. And I think this goes for Army, Navy, and even people who survive bombing, is you get veterans that talk about it from the off. So, it's their youth, it's what they've known, they talk about it, all through the 50s, they release memoirs, do all that sort of stuff. I think that's a small minority. I think the majority actually start opening up near the end of their life, or when they think they're coming to the end of their life. So my experience is it's been grandchildren that they've opened up to, or not at all, or that they've kept it, or just be the odd comment every now and again. But yeah, I think a large number do start opening up, and I think that's contributed as well to this this need or this want to commemorate, because there is this fresh opening up of veterans.
Completely right. You look at the 2000s. A lot of memoirs get published in 2000.
Yeah.
Sorry, a lot of memoirs get published in 2000s. I mean, my work looked at that. The late 90s and the 2000s, you see this massive array of new publications about people's experiences in Bomber Command, and that does shape the narrative. The 90s and 2000s see this change, not complete change, but a move towards understanding the lives of crewmen. Because often Bomber Command was seen as a sense of statistics, numbers, and the like. You look at the histories of 50s and 60s. It's a lot of them are, statistical. Histories of Bomber Command. There's a few differences, but generally, but 90s you get these personal stories come out, and then you start to see a shift, and almost a change. Where they go, well, we can criticize the grades, but also the crewmen also had their own lives as well, and their experiences, and that's a whole new history that comes out. My grandfather annoyingly didn't publish a memoir, didn't talk about his experience. He was one of those few who kind of kept it close to his chest. But after his death, we were going through his personal belongings, and hardly anything from his time in Bomber Command. Like, he had some photos.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a moment we went to a museum where you could look at squadron numbers, right, and history. I remember asking him the squadron numbers, and he wouldn't tell me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a part of you that could completely understand that, not just what they saw, what they experienced, their own coming to terms with it. But also, I mean, the average age was about 20, 21 in Bomber Command. If you were 25, 26, you were an old man. You were like, all right, granddad, telling us what to do, sort of thing. But you think, the war ends, I don't know, say you join up and you're 23 when it ends. Your priority now is, right, that was that. I want to start a family. I want to have a career. I want to move on. I want to live my life because I've somehow come through this.
Yeah.
And I think that also helps with not talking about it. It's like, no, that was then. I've done that. Now I'm focusing on this. I want to raise kids. I want to, and I think that's another factor to consider. Just simply thinking about the age of these people.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, people, they've got the lives to move on to, and something my grandfather, he starts his own business after the war, which doesn't work out. He then goes into the print work where he, goes into basically middle management pretty much for most of his.
That's what my granddad did actually. He was in print work, so I never knew that.
More connections, but Bomber Command and print work, as there's a connection there. But no, it is certainly interesting that he does that. But I do know from my grandmother's stories that that he did change from experience in the war. But I don't know what he saw. I don't know if he ever felt, because I know that he served. It looks like he served in Air Transport Command, as we discussed beforehand, from 43 to 48. I wonder if he didn't want to talk about his squad numbers. Maybe maybe he thought he saw, but maybe also for the fact that maybe he felt, he didn't serve in the bombing raids as others did. Maybe he felt a bit of annoyance, a little bit of shame about that. It's possible. I don't know, and I'll never know, which is a sad thing about it.
Yeah, and I mean, another common thing is survivor's guilt. Even those that are in the front line, they think, I made it through, and then so many they often say better people, the real heroes are the ones that didn't make it back. That's often the thing that veterans say, and it's like, no, you did exactly the same as them. that's another factor, that survivor's guilt. And again, that probably drives, right, got to get on, don't want to talk about it. Let's live a good life, you know.
There's a story of my grand. I might say it in a talk, might not, but my grandfather, many years after the war, he goes to the graveyard. I think in Sheppey, um, and he finds the grave of one of his best friends growing up, who served during the same time as he did in Bomber Command. Came a rear gunner because they didn't have the mechanical training like my grandfather did. He died on his first mission, and
Wow.
I think those kind of things, bring home the survivor's guilt as well, because
Yeah.
during the same time, in the same service, one of you survives, one of you doesn't. I think that it's going to impact you. You can't. I think I'll be shocked if it didn't really.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
as a crew, you were incredibly tight. You were incredibly, you had to be, you're a unit that has to all work together. Everyone has to do their jobs. You have to have that full trust in everybody, you know. And I think that adds to that, but also it kind of adds the not talking to other crews because the losses are so high, because having to go through that. And it's the same with Fighter Command. It's the same with the Army, the Navy. You keep to your core of friends, your group, you know. And also, like, if a crew member, I don't know, a rear gunner had a stomach bug, couldn't fly, or was wounded or whatever, and someone else would come in, it would be seen as bad luck, you
yeah.
know.
I was about to say that. Yeah,
Yeah.
people did not like having new crewmen. I believe my grandfather was actually he joined a kind of a crew that was
Oh,
depleted.
wow.
And I'm pretty sure, yeah, the experiences you have when that happens, you got to, it takes a while
Mm,
for you to be fitted in,
yeah,
because bomber crews were extremely superstitious as well,
definitely.
uh, massively superstitious, and so you've got all these things going on in their lives, and when they survive, it's kind of this kind of relief. And the thing about the trauma of, you don't know when the next mission is going to be. Technically,
No.
you're kind of sitting there waiting. All these kind of aspects
Mm,
impact them, and so they
mm,
are incredibly interesting people. And I do wish that I had spoken to my grandfather more and questioned him a bit more,
mm,
because there's certain things that I wish I kind of knew from him. Get the details down.
mm,
Like I like stories, for example, of superstition in the cruise, of like stories where he's in Palestine and the like. Yeah, they're easy to get out of
mm.
him.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the superstition thing, I mean, they really ranged. Someone was like, right, I've got to put my left boot on first. And, the stories of people, I didn't put my left boot on first. It's over, and it sets that mindset, doesn't it? But then you had Lucky Charms, you had little teddies, you had St. Christopher's, you had whatever. And I mean, it's a case of, a case of putting on your boot the right way. You did that the first mission, you came back, you're probably going through your mind, maybe that was it. I've got to do everything like I did before because I
yeah,
came back, and it's a coping mechanism, isn't it, really?
it is. It is. And also the things you see as a crewman as well. So my grandfather did parachute drops and supply drops as well. We know that because one of his stories he said was one parachutist got stuck at the end of the plane,
Jeez.
and they had to land with him on the
Yeah.
plane, and it killed him. And I think things like that as well. These
Yeah.
stories, they stay like these crewmen. No matter what they did, they saw just
Mhm.
horrendous things that
Yeah. And I mean, it
people
spreads to the
do
ground crew as well. I mean, imagine, it's the ground crew that are going to have to
deal with a
deal with
body.
this and also, I mean, the ground crew took tremendous pride in their aircraft. So they were usually assigned, an aircraft or a couple of aircraft. And they took pride in their work. And if one didn't come back, it would play on their minds. Did I tighten that nut not quite right? Did I fix that machine gun that was jamming a lot before? Did I fix it? Did I put enough oil in or whatever? And you think that stress factor. And I mean, you've got cases of that I've read where, a tail gun has been shredded to bits sorry to use that language, but, and they've had to literally hose them out.
Yeah,
And they could be someone that they're having a cup of coffee with, the morning before or the night before. And you just
Oh,
kind of, wow.
I mean, if a plane crash lands, a plane explodes on landing as well, which did happen, and all these kind of things, then
Mm,
those things aren't, you don't forget those aspects. So
mm,
yeah, throughout all of the, from the ground crew to those in the air, servicing
yeah,
Bomber Command was, and all services as well, but also we were focused on Bomber Command here this
yeah,
afternoon, morning,
yeah.
was traumatic. And so
Mm,
which goes back to, again, when my grandfather left the service and he saw how Bomber Command were treated in his eyes. I mean, it was a sense of just
yeah, yeah.
just anger. I don't know if other veterans felt the same. I know some have done and have said that out, that they felt, hurt by a
Mm,
reaction. I don't know if it's the same for everyone. I don't know, but certainly it
yeah.
was a really tough moment in their lives to go through what they went through and then to come out into civilian life. Almost can't talk about Bomber Command because it's such a
Mhm.
good subject
And I
in
mean,
some cases.
that's been perpetuated and continued in popular culture. So really, you've got the Dambusters, and that's the Bomber Command film. I mean, yeah, you've got Appointment in London, you've got 633 Squadron, not a heavy bomber thing, but it is Bomber Command sort of thing. But you haven't really got a lot, you know. Whereas Fighter Command, you've got Battle of Britain. They're the golden boys and girls. They're the ones that, saved Britain in 1940. Whereas with
Yeah,
Bomber Command, it's not prevalent in British society. And I mean, the other thing to think about is with the National Memorial, the first really recognised memorial,
yeah,
national,
yeah.
with one of Harris, who full of controversy, and when it was unveiled was booed because of the controversy, but also because, hey, why are you not commemorating the 55,000 that
Yeah.
aircrew that didn't come back? Why are you focusing on the one man?
This is interesting because my grandfather did, he very much admired Harris. I think because in 47 Harris publishes his
A
defense of
bomber
Bomber Command.
offensive, yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he publishes it just before, I think, scrutiny of Bomber Command starts to really take place.
Yeah, yeah,
It's almost a preemptive
yeah,
defense before it happens. But Harris comes out, and so a lot of crewmen have a loyalty to Harris because they feel that almost he's like their personal defender.
yeah,
And he almost puts himself in the firing line. That book, he puts himself in the
yeah,
firing line, which I think is very interesting. And so my grandfather had a lot of respect for Harris and the like. But he also the film that Busters film,
mm,
completely right. It's one of the kind of the major films of Bomber Command. It's how people see the nice parts of Bomber Command.
yeah.
But my grandfather did not like Guy Gibson. Not like him. He
Well, a lot of people didn't. A lot of aircrew didn't. But again, I mean, Gibson was incredibly brave. I mean, the operations he flew on, he was a fantastic pilot. But he was, he had a short temper. He didn't have time for mistakes. I mean, there's infamously, I can't remember the name of the pilot in the Dams raid. So the brief is obviously they're carrying this top secret weapon.
Yeah,
Bring it back. Don't crash land over enemy territory. And there's something wrong with the aircraft. It flies back. And Gibson really rips into this pilot, the aircrew, saying, "What the hell are you doing? You should have just pressed on." And it's like, hey, there are bigger things here. We've got a secret weapon that we don't want the Nazis getting hold of. And that's an example, really. But you think about the stress factor, and I'm certain that Gibson, by the Dams raid, is suffering heavily with post-traumatic stress disorder, and that he's sent to he's relieved of command immediately after the Dams raid to America to lecture, and Canada as well, actually, North America, and he's a husk really of the man, and he's desperate to get back. Again, he's got that survivor's guilt, which I think he has through most of the war. And again, that drives that anger, that irritation, a pretty short fuse with ground crew if they made tiny mistakes or whatever. But I mean, you think about the stress factor and you think about what he went through, you can kind of understand it. Not forgiving him, but you can kind of know why.
and yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was on his third tour, wasn't he, when he died?
Yeah.
Tour, which is, think about how many missions that is. That's ridiculous. Like, a lot of people didn't survive one tour, let
Yeah.
alone on their third. It is utterly incredible. Just shows the skill and the fortune as well
Yeah.
of him. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because my I think a lot of crews, especially my grandfather, I think he saw the Dam Busters and saw Gibson being portrayed as this character and he was like, what about the rest of us? You know, we'll
Not
focus on
sleep
this
as well.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, focus on this guy who I didn't even like that much.
Mm.
And a lot of the, well, I guess in his mind, all the good guys don't get the recognition.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all these kind of feelings, you know, they pull down the family. You know, they pull down to the family. You know, my dad's very strongly, uh, very pro bomber command in his actions, and that falls down to me as well. So when I was doing my research, I already had views on Dan Barcer's raid.
Yeah.
I had views on Dresden. I already had views on a lot of aspects. Before I even let the sources do the talking, I just went into this kind of this mindset because it passed down the family. The anger that grandfather that he had, not say anger, but the hurt he felt
Mm.
certainly was
Mm.
obvious to me,
Yeah.
and my dad especially more obvious to him. And then it was in
Yeah.
you know in my life, and I'm no, look, I went to IF Scampton, you know, and they've got Guy Gibbs's desk there and all this kind of stuff. I think
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Yeah. Scampton. Yeah.
And I was on base and I toured it and things like that. And it's just in the back of my head, like I was doing research and looking at these kind of things. Back in my head, like these personal aspects were still very
Yeah.
much there. Um, but obviously, with people I was talking to, I can never let that shine.
Mm.
Wow, I always had to hold that back and pretend I was,
Yeah.
not impacted at all and this kind of
Yeah.
thing by what I was seeing, but you know, but kind of away from that and then looking at the source I had and writing it. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that was really good bringing out in this talk is that, I mean, you use your example, but I think as historians, we probably do go into things with an unconscious bias. So whether we're naturally, I don't know, left wing, right wing, male, female, and we've got attitudes towards gender or upbringing, background, nation as well, culture, identity. These are all things that actually play at the back of your mind when you're approaching something, and learning to be unbiased is, or objective to things is a skill actually you have to really develop.
you do, yeah. You can't. And I think every student is going to be biased in their way, and always
Yeah.
going to be there. You can never get rid of it. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think all you can do is try to lessen it, or you try to at least control it.
Yeah.
That's the best way of doing it. Is that, or the key thing is you being aware of it.
Yeah.
So okay, yeah, this is probably me just being just angry at such because of my local area or my cultural identity or where it could be.
Yeah.
It's important that we recognise that. And I think the thing with my talk and my dissertation is that I went into it passion first, the energy first, and the motives first, historian second.
Yeah.
That's where the issues go. I mean, one command we talked about before we started recording is a motor topic.
Yeah.
You can't research it and not be, well, you could be not be moved by it, but you'll pretty much likely be moved by what you read and by what you're looking at. And it is a topic you have to dance around. You can't just go just blase into it and like doing research on 1648, for example, and my work. It's much easier to have the disconnect.
Yeah.
Because it's 300, 400 years ago. But as we've been talking today, Bomb Command is also more recent history. People still living from the time period. Relatives still, remember their parents' stories from the war.
Yeah.
So we have to navigate that as well. I think something that, especially we both can test to is navigating that. I navigate, my dad's feelings as well throughout my research, as well. And I was always very much aware, what happens if someone reads this? What are they going to think? And I think same thing for you in that regard as well. When you're researching things like bomb commands, the emotive aspects you have to be very much aware of, don't you?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I'll just mention two things. The first thing is I watched a documentary, Lucy Worsley, about the myth of the Blitz sort of thing. She's talking about the dock area of London, the East End sort of thing. And I was watching it with my dad, and he said, "Gosh, that's where my mum was." My nan. And I was thinking the same thing, going, "Oh my God, that's only a couple of streets away from, where my nan was." And you can't help think that, that's a natural human reaction to have that connection. And, But the second thing is, I mean, you develop as a researcher. I remember coming across a source somewhere, I can't remember, this was a long time ago, where I was looking at combat reports, and it was a German gunner, a Luftwaffe gunner, that took pleasure in machine gunning up and down the street. I think it was in Sunderland or somewhere like that. It was in the north, and saying he saw a woman with a pram, and he was like machine gunning around, and he enjoyed watching her, duck and weave and all this sort of stuff. And I remember the natural human emotion is, you absolute,
Yeah,
XYZ, this is disgusting. But then not long afterwards, I was looking at combat reports from American fighters saying, oh, I just love shooting things on the ground. I don't even care if they're soldiers or whatever. It's just so much fun. And going, wow, okay, didn't expect that. And that was my own sense of bias, as a very young historian reading
yeah,
these. And I mean, you do come across some absolutely horrific stories as well. I mean, I'll share one very quickly about the United States Army Air Force. So there was a bomber that returned from a raid. And it was B-17. Underneath B-17, just for the viewers who might not know, you've got a turret that
yeah.
rotates underneath, protects, the under area. This had jammed.
Okay.
And they were saying, okay, well, we can land. It's fine. What had also happened was the electrics in general had failed. Couldn't get the wheels down. So they were going to have to belly land. This guy couldn't get out. This gunner couldn't get out. And the crew were there going, oh, you can bail out. It's a belly landing. And they were like, no, we're staying with him. This is a crew. We see things through together. So they were chatting to him, communicating with the ground, with the control tower. What do we do? What do we do? It's like, it's going to have to be a belly landing because you're going to run out of fuel eventually. And wheels can't get down. They're obviously talking through procedures to get the wheels working. Nothing worked. And they had to belly land with this guy stuck in the turret. And it's just, you read that and you cannot begin to think about, let alone the guy in the turret, but his friends that have to come to deal with that, the ground crew that have to deal with that, the person in the control tower going, did I go through every procedure? Did I make sure that they did everything they could? And you read stuff like that and you have to have a breather, or I do. I have to go outside and go, you know what, I'm going to have to go in the garden and take a few breaths or go for a walk or something. And again, you get it on the ground. There was another story about, I think it was two German women. One was carrying a suitcase and packed up, and the woman next to her lost everything, and she was having a go. Said, "Yo, you managed to get a suitcase, didn't you? You managed to go back and grab your possessions while everyone else was fleeing and all this sort of stuff. You sold them so and so." And I think she had a go at her, and the woman next to her just started laughing manically, and said, "It's okay, it's my baby." Opened it up, and inside was the child remains of this baby. To which case the other woman just went absolutely white, going, yeah, this. And I mean, you read stuff like that, I have to, put the laptop down, put the book down, put the manuscript down and go, yeah,
Sometimes
I
just to,
can't.
yeah, you need time to reflect, time to just take a breather from it all, because these things
Yeah.
are incredibly emotional. And I think when you talk about Bomber Command as well, and you read the numbers of
Oh, it's
deaths,
insane. Yeah.
and you read the stories as well of the crews, and you I mean, my grandfather told me stories as well, and you just go, you have to just walk away for five
Yeah.
seconds. You
Yeah.
have to just take that breather, and the stories to navigate that is tough.
Yeah.
And
Because you're still human at the end of the day. You still hear these stories and go,
yeah,
and another thing that you unconsciously do, or I unconsciously do, is sometimes you try and put yourself in that perspective. What would you be thinking? How would you deal with this? And you're thinking, especially with my command, I say they're 20, 21 years old. And I think, well, I was like a 20, 21 years old. And I think, I I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have gone up night after night in this aircraft laden with bombs and oxygen and, fuel and all the rest of it.
yeah.
Or could
I
I
mean,
have done because I didn't feel fear? I don't know. It's because you're that younger. It's, yeah.
exactly. I mean, it is something that is what we often do as students. So we put ourselves in there and do that. That's a good thing. And if we won't get emotive by what we read, then I think that's dangerous as well, because then we just
Yeah.
become just robots, and we just become desensitized to what we're reading. And we never
Yeah.
want everyone to be desensitized by this. I mean, I even go to Naseby, right? And this is a Civil War thing here. But I then I think about people, dying on the battlefield. And the last stand was also, for example, Rupert's regiment. And knowing that they all died. So that
Yeah.
everyone else could get away. But everyone died in that moment. They got cannon fire,
Yeah.
shot with muskets. If you don't get emoted by that, then I think as well that's also dangerous as well.
Yeah.
Being impacted by our research, being impacted by what we read, is a good thing. It helps us. It helps us develop
Yeah.
and helps us to actually to be serious with what we're doing. Be serious and take it take it seriously, not take it just as a I'll do this because might as well do it, or it's just another source or whatever. To see these stories helps us to be serious about what we're talking about. And with my research about my
Yeah.
grandfather, it made me serious. I was serious as what I was going to do. The big problem that I had, and the big problem again as historians, especially our first stages as historians, is that we don't take that step back from it. We don't put that laptop screen down, for example, and we just charge
Mm.
in, and we get so motivated. We get so motivated by what we read that comes out into the page, and that leads to a problem of spiral there. What you said, what you've done is exactly what you should do with a source. Is that you get when you read it, take that step
Mm.
back from it, and you just breathe for a bit. It's
Yeah.
important that you do that.
Yeah.
To take that distance, to take that step back from it. Because again, I said mentioned this in the talk, is that my biggest problem is I didn't take a step back from it. I was just so geared, so like inflamed, so
Yeah.
emotional about it, that the emotion ran through rather than the emotion drive me, it took over.
Mm.
I think that's a
Yeah.
danger there.
I think
And
that's I think that's something that you do go through as a historian at some point. You, you know, with you, it happened to be your dissertation and such like. Um, I think actually, and compliments to yourself doing this talk it's a tremendous lesson for people who want to be historians, and it's something definitely to learn a lot from. If anyone watching you's thinking about, doing a BA or whatever, these are things that are worthy to be thought of. These are approaches, and we've all done it. We've all written things, and been emotive as we develop as historians, So yeah.
100%, yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I hope that anyone who does listen to this and or to the talk, whoever they might be, I hope that this does help them. And even for historians who've been in the game for a long time,
Mm.
it just as a little minder, because again, we can
Yeah.
get so caught up in things that we just forget to just go, what, let's just take a step back. Where's my work going here? What's leading my work? Take that step back and just reflect. It's not a bad thing to do.
Mm.
Because I can look back now at my work and I can go, yeah, actually what the writing is a bit bad. I mean, it's bad because because I was terrible at writing, but also because of the emotion of it as well. But I consider the development of it, of the
Mm.
story. And if you're doing your BA right now as well, maybe you're doing your BA, don't worry.
Mm.
Um, I think you can go to your BA. You can do, maybe think, oh, maybe I should do something because maybe it's a bit too personal. Don't worry. Remember that all this is a learning curve. That you're still learning, you're
Yeah.
still developing as a historian.
Yeah.
That you'll make mistakes. That you'll mess up occasionally. As maybe I did with that dissertation in certain places.
Mm.
But you learn from them,
Mm.
and I've learned from it. I mean, I'm still learning now, but I've learned a lot since that BA time,
Yeah.
and you will learn again. And that's it's one of the reasons I did a talk for,
Yeah.
because a lot of people look at the BA and going, oh, it's terrible, and that was it. And I'm thinking, well, I wanted to kind of reflect on it and actually see, was it terrible? Why was it terrible? And the like.
Yeah.
And, you know, I said in the talk as well, that I will go back to my commands. Um, I will go back to researching, especially, the changing narrative and why it changed. At some point in the future, probably,
There's
when
a book
I'm
there. There's a book there, Michael. I'll chip in. I'll help.
to do it edited volume. There's definitely historians out. It's a good idea for edited volume, actually. To be
Yeah.
honest, I've got ideas. I've got loads of ideas of books, but never will come to fruition. But I'll go back to it because I want to. I want to become a grandfather's story in it as well. But I would go back to it with a slightly different mindset. I think that is what is helpful, and it's never bad going back to things. So someone in the evening talk said, yeah, it's certainly a problem of the personal history. It can overtake you, and I do agree. And so you got to be careful when I do go back to it eventually. I'll have a lot of people to proofread to ensure that it does follow suit. That's the key
But,
thing.
I think it's really important that you have done this talk, you have said, and you're explaining how you learn so that other people learn and other people develop, and you yourself are developing as a historian doing that. I know every time I give a talk, I learn a lot, not just the practical presenting skills, but also about approaches, people giving feedback, etc. But I think just rewinding slightly, I think the best historians will hold their hand up and say, I am still learning, I am still developing. And I know my supervisors have all said that,
James, you're saying it on one of the best historians. Oh, great.
Maybe a backhanded way, I don't know, but no, in a serious on a serious side of it, I think that's very, very important. It is still it's constantly a learning curve with these sort of things and developing.
Exactly. I think the best ones are ones who are, and then so all those who are listening who aren't going into history as a career path or as an interest or whatnot, maybe you just love history anyway. When you watch on TV, notice that there's stories behind why they're doing aspects and why they're talking about a certain thing and why they're arguing a certain way. There's stories there as well. Every historian's been influenced by something in their life. You have James. I have been influenced by things.
Yeah.
It's not always the big things as well. It's not always the big family things. It can be other things in life. Maybe it could be a friend. It could be where we lived, or a moment in our life that stands out to us. That every historian's influenced by something, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
You always see it's something interesting. Historians never like to use the word I in their work. You don't often see I say this, and I agree that to a point because the word I can be annoying sometimes, especially when you're trying to argue something because it gets a bit clunky. And I'll never use the word I in chapters, but I don't think it's anything wrong to use the word I sometimes in inductions, in inclusions, just to make me to know that it is that comes from a historian. If you, I know James that you obviously hopefully teaching next year.
Yeah, the autumn, yeah.
Students will ask us questions about the use of the word I, and I remember students asked me that a lot, and that got me thinking about my research because I'm thinking actually how much of the personal does come out in our work, and I think historians we get a bit too scared of the word I sometimes. Maybe we should not use it all the time, but maybe we should allow it on occasion, just to bring out that because it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad, in my opinion, anyway, and that's why I'm who I am.
I also think we can sometimes get trapped in our own mindset way of thinking and even our own topics. Sometimes we can get stuck in the same areas. And another thing is go out there and talk, and that's a great thing about History Indoors. Another little plug for you, Michael, is this is a platform to be able to do that. We've been able to get our research, we've been able to communicate and, talk to people. That's just essentially it because you'll see a different perspective, you'll a different approach,
100%,
whatever.
100%. I mean, I think it was your first talk, I think, James, where a lot of people from from across the country about Bomber Command were in the audience and asking questions, and I was like, this is insane. I was like, it's like someone in my talk, someone's father was away in Dresden, for example. It's like, wow, I never would have even got a chance to talk to them if I wasn't for this as well, and especially for PhD students. We've never PhD students never really often get the chance to do things like this, and it's been great for myself and for everyone, just to be able to talk about our history
Mm,
and to have that and to show that personal connection. All roundtables always ask, what influenced you in this topic.
mm,
It's been a great learning curve for us all to kind of actually reflect on our own journeys and stuff.
yeah.
And we will grow as historians, we'll develop, and Bomber Command's been the
Mm.
key aspect for my development, and I'll always be grateful to my grandfather and to those who helped me in that. So
Yeah, it's it. And as I say, as you were saying, Bomber Command does seem to still hold this interest, this people going, oh, my uncle, my granddad, my father, whatever. It still seems to hold. Everyone seems to have. Or what I've come across, everyone seems to have some sort of connection to it.
yeah,
When they've, it's yeah,
100%. And I would also say as well, just as we come to a close of this, because we've been talking for a
we
while,
could talk for days.
days, and this is it's quite crazy. I never actually met, I never saw a Bomber Command outside, so I was like, it's always been quite nice to talk to you because
Mm.
it's like though you are James and whatnot, you do like Bomber Command, which is good for you. Um, but I was. Just a quick comment as well is that the Halifax bomber is better than Lancaster. Well, okay, so on that note, I am going to... It is interesting as well, talking about just crews and memory. I mean, memory attached to just aircraft.
Oh, crews love the aircraft they flew, even if, as a historian, you're going, that was a death trap, surely. Like, no, best aircraft. There is this attachment. Same goes to ground crew as well.
James, we have to do a trip to York to look at the Halifax in York.
Definitely.
So that's another History Indoors trip to organise, apart from everything else we've got to do. Well, James, thank you very much for being here this morning, afternoon now.
This afternoon now, yeah. No, pleasure. Really, really enjoyed it. And I think it was an incredibly brave talk to give because it covers so much areas, approaches. I always find, history and emotions a fascinating concept and how they're linked. So yeah, really, 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 really interesting stuff.
Thank you. I want to do something different and move away from Colchester slightly for a bit. But don't worry, guys. I've got another talk planned about the Colchester pageant 1909. So stay tuned for that in the very far future. But yeah, and until next time, as thank you very much for listening and watching. We appreciate you taking time to be here, listening to me and James waffle on about history. We do love it though.
Yeah.
But until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you hopefully very, very soon. So bye from myself and bye from him.
Bye.